Imagine having a serial killer in your town, well known, clearly careless, and never knowing the true identity. Many people are unaware of this infamous killer that took place in England. There were many suspects to who this criminal was, but never a true identity to this day was given to the murderer. According to an article titled Jack the Ripper, despite the mystery of identity, this person killed and mutilated at least 5 women in London. Not only did he kill, but he also wrote letters mocking the police department since they could never capture his identity. To better inform you of this, we will go into his crimes, suspects, letters, and the journey of attempting to uncover this mystery. There were factually 5 murderers that match with this killer, multiple letters, and many reasons as to how he got away. This article reveals that there could be as many as 8 or more murders that match with this criminal. This argument does still go on since 1888 when it still happened. But because his identity was never uncovered, it is still unknown for sure. Why didn't they catch this killer? Jack the Ripper brought along a type of crime that the Victorian Police Department were not well known with. At the time of these crimes, simple things like fingerprints, crime scene photography, or modern forensics in general were not used. They were not well known yet. Continuing from this article, the police department also did not use press to their advantage, or any media for that matter. They kept them at arm's length, not giving any information. According to Richard Jones, the Criminal Investigation Department during this time was very demoralized. The only facts that they had to go off of for this murderer was that he must have been a doctor or a butcher due to the precise cuts on the victims. This showed that he had human anatomy knowledge. They also assumed the murderer had a past in journalism because of the way the letters were written. The police letters that were sent to the department were somewhat poetic. They seemed to be written with a message behind them, but never directly said. Jones also says that some letters would have images such as a coffin or a knife. In one letter, there was an image given that was actually the murder weapon that he had used on one of his victims. Although they had some things to go off of, with little knowledge of forensics and not enough evidence, he was still never identified. Historic figure states that all 5 of the murders that were done for sure by this killer were women. These women were also prostitutes. These 5 murders had a name given to them, the Conical 5. This was because they were Whitechapel murders. Many of the victims' body parts were also missing or cut off. A recent article from Whitechapel Jack reveals that one of the victims, Martha, was stabbed 39 times and left in a stairwell. Another victim, Mary, was found in front of a gated horse stable, nearly decapitated. These are just some examples of how careless this killer was. The bodies were left in the open and did not seem to have much heart given into them, judging by the wounds. One of the more mutilated victims was found with her intestines out of her body. Her uterus was also removed. One girl, Elizabeth, was much less mutilated, although her throat was cut open. The police found it odd that no other incisions had been made like the other victims. Due to the similarities in these victims, they ruled the positive 5 as victims of Jack the Ripper, although there were 11 murders. Going back into the article titled Jack the Ripper, all of these killings took place within a mile within each other on the east side of London. These killings continued through August 7th through September 10th, 1888. One of the main suspects during this time was the grandson of Queen Victoria, Walter Sickert. Richard Jones stated that Sickert had a hatred towards women from past experiences. He would also be very fantasized with murder. His DNA was tested with multiple envelopes that the letters came in, and one possible match was found on a stamp that was located on one of the letters. One thing many people wondered was, how did this infamous killer get his name? Many people referred to him as the Whitechapel Murderer or Leather Apron. So where did Jack the Ripper come from? Looking back at the article titled Whitechapel Jack, one of the first letters that was written in red ink and sent to the police department that bragged about the murders was signed Jack the Ripper. This name stuck because the second letter that was received referred back to the name. This indicated it truly was the killer and not a hoax, as the name was not released. After the letters were released, however, then they were released to the public to try to gather more information. In conclusion, due to the lack of resources and evidence, Jack the Ripper was never truly identified. To better understand this, we look at the murders, the letters, the lack of forensics, and many people remember Jack the Ripper and wonder who he was. Many also wonder why he stopped or what his backstory was to make him so hateful. But without knowing his true identity, even though we don't know it, he's still one of the most infamous serial killers in London. And here's a picture of one of the letters that was written by him.